Welcome, everyone, to a very educational episode here on Isles Talk. My name is Paul Kreischer. I am your your only host here for this evening. I basically gave Gary and Joe the nights off, probably for like the next month. They've earned it. They've been busy. They've got busy lives themselves. And to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, this is my favorite time of the year, believe it or not. Uh, when I first started blogging, I just realized it's been 15 years. Um, yeah, I started blogging back in 2008. I actually started writing a lot of paragraphs on Newsday for Alan Hahn one of these days, or not with Alan Hahn, but on his page. And I'm going to have to apologize to Alan at some point for the long ones. But I started my own blog after getting those recommendations with Islanders in the Crease. And then just a couple of years later, Gary found me, and I was doing a brief stint with Eyes on Isles and then Isles Talk from there on out. And every single year since then, I have been covering the draft because back in 2008, that is when Garth Snow took over. And he said the Islanders are going into a rebuild. So for the last 15 years, I've covered the prospects, I've covered the draft to the point where I started to get a really good pulse on what the Islanders were going to do, at least in terms of a direction. So um, today is no different. And what I love about doing the draft and what I love about looking at the organization as a whole is that it forces me to take 3 steps back, 4 steps back, and take a much larger approach. So that way I stay on the right track. That's one of the reasons why it's a love-hate relationship with some people that I have. Um, as long as I stay on track, that's where the work is good. And if I'm still on the right track, I can go faster. So, for example, what that means is this second round pick, I can tell you because you're taking a few steps back and you're looking at the entire organization. I can tell you the Islanders are going to go best player available. They should do that anyway, but to say they should focus on a goaltender or a defenseman, a centerman, it doesn't matter. The Islanders need everything. And it's not because, it's not a well, duh moment. That's not what this is. I'm going to show you guys why it should be the best player available right now. So, welcome to Isles Talk. Welcome to a very educational segment of Isles Talk. For those of you younger Islander fans, welcome. I hope this is a very good learning experience. Again, for those of you who don't know me, I grew up in the latter part of the dynasty, the mid 80s, the early 90s. I love building a team through the draft. I'm that kind of fan. Um, to me, Lou Lamoriello is like a stepson to Bill Torrey. He he's not a direct descendant, but Lou has certainly learned from Bill Torrey, and that's why, for now, I'm still a fan of what Lou Lamoriello has done, and especially with what he's been able to do the last 5 years, um, because of COVID and the development or non-development of quite a few players around college, juniors, the NHL, the AHL as a whole. So, in this segment, I'm going to show you what Lou has done over the last couple of years, why he's drafted over agers and why they're going to work. And we're also going to go over the juniors. And I'm going to show you what kind of a positive impact this is going to have on the organization. Not to mention, for me, yes, the Islanders need to make a couple of tweaks. Agreed. There's no denying that. And you guys are going to be correct on that. But I'm going to show you tonight and over the next couple of weeks that building up this farm system is the most crucial thing the Islanders can do, and it's the most important thing they can do moving on. Irregardless of who the next GM or whoever you want the next GM to be, the Islanders farm system, and I'm including the East Coast Hockey League, the Worcester Railers, and the Bridgeport Islanders, they all need to be ready to go this season. And that's going to impact the New York Islanders moving forward. So without further ado, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my annual Path to the Draft 2023 edition, the Juniors. So for those of you who want to follow along, we're going to do this. Go on to Isles Talk. Excuse me. Yep. Go on to Isles Talk. What's up, boys? Hello, everybody. Go on to Isles Talk. Scroll down a little bit. And for whatever reason, we got to work, we got to work on this. Path to the Draft, the Juniors. Click on that. And if you want to follow along, follow along. I will say right now, and I'm going to take care of the defenseman first. Here we are. So I'm going to take care of the defenseman first. For those of you who want defensemen coming up anytime soon, don't bother. They're not ready. And I'm not talking about anyone in Bridgeport. This is strictly juniors. What I like about these defensemen is how young they were when they were drafted. Okay, these are literally kids who turned 18 at a late age, or these kids were 18 for the entire season. Okay, I'm going to take a quick step back here before we get into the defenseman. What is a prospect? Okay, we're going to be going over prospects for the entire month. We're going to be going into prospects come draft time. For me, from what I've learned, a prospect is obviously someone right before the draft. They get drafted, but where are they in terms of development? For me, it's usually around the age of 18 to 23. I know a lot of people will go 18 to 22 to a degree. I can go along with that depending on their skill set. It's usually 18 to 22. But from what I've seen from the Islanders, they like to go to age 23. And especially now, and again, COVID really, really messed up the development of almost everybody. And we'll get into that later on. But a lot of players lost a year of development, a year and a half of development. So what you're now seeing from the drafting that Lou did was that he's either drafting players that were very, very young or overagers who had that time to show what they really could do in their junior leagues. So there was no in between. He scored big with William Dufour. That could still end up being a steal of a draft at some point. But that's my definition of a prospect. It's usually between the ages of 18 and 23. And, I do get that sense of, I do get the rebuttal of 23, you're a professional, you should know what they're doing at this point. I get that. But if you take a look at Noah Dobson, and even Matt Barzal did this at 23. They were doing stuff that made you shake your head of like, why? And that's why, for me, it's the fans' interpretation of certain players at that age that gives me the incentive to give the prospects an extra year at 23, because in reality, they start the season at 22. They finished the year up at 23. There's still at least that 6-month gap. And I'm that type of fan at this point, and I've noticed the Islanders doing this. If a player turns 23 and they're 23 for the entire season, I give them that, because it's that year of development where they literally find their niche. They find out who they are where they are in the NHL. And Matthew, there's a part of me that agrees with this. 25 is when you need to see significant development. If you take a look at the New Jersey Devils right now, their average age is 25. Okay, we'll see where they are when free agency is over, when the summer is over. I don't look at the averages of each of those teams until the beginning of the season. But yes, 25 is, kind of like that rebuild season. You take a look at Chicago, you take a look at Arizona, you take a look at New Jersey right now. Those were your rebuilding teams. They're at the average age of 25. There is a little more leeway, but I think by the age of 23, most fans should know where a particular player is with that organization. In this case, the Islanders right now. It's usually around 23. And especially with COVID, they lost a year and a half. So again, when you have younger players at that age of 21, 22, 23, you have to remind other fans they're still kids. They're still learning. They're still growing. And that's where I have some of them this year in my graduates, but I'll get to them in a few weeks. Right now, let's get back to the juniors. Listen, I really do like the defenseman that Lou has drafted so far. Alexei Malinin, he's right out of the Finnish league. He was 17 in some of the World Junior Championships in international games. Alexei Malinin was another young draft, 189th out of the 2021 draft. He could probably be at best a third line defenseman. He has the probability to get there, but he hasn't scored. He hasn't showed that scoring touch yet. And this is one of those reasons why if any of these prospects are 17, 18, I don't necessarily bring them up because they're still learning or they just got into the pro game. Okay. But what I like about Malinin is that he already has the international experience. He's been playing in the Finnish Liga, which is the Finnish professional seasons. He's been playing in all of those games. Great mobile skater. I would probably put him somewhere in a Nick Leddy or Devon Toews mode, but he hasn't learned how to score yet. Cutler, I'll get to that in a minute. I'll save that question for later. A good mobile skater. I like Malinin, but again, 17, 18, he's just starting. So is there enough growth? Absolutely. I'm going to move down to the next group of defensemen here. I'm going to skip the forwards for now. Kelly Adelius. Kelly Adelius was the 65th overall pick in 2022. This was a kid that probably should have gone in 30 through 35. He probably should have been a top first round pick somewhere, but he was one of those players where he fell into the Islanders' lap. This kid, again, he just literally turned 19 yesterday. He just turned 19 yesterday. So the Islanders drafted another young defenseman where you get all of 18, all of 19, all of 20, all of 21, all of 22. There is enough time to develop this young defenseman. He was in the World Junior Championships, But as the competition got tougher, he started to see less minutes. When you're 18 years old, that happens. If he were able to play at such a higher level, he would have been a first round pick. Again, Lou has enough time with this kid where if he stays in Europe, he continues to play, I'm going to say 19 solid, maybe even at 20, and then comes over to Bridgeport. I think you're going to see more of him on an upside. I also think as of right now, I see him as a bottom pair NHL player. Defenseman. And that's the other thing with all of these prospects right now. Don't expect a lot. These may turn into your Alan Quines. These may turn into um, your Princes. Um, give me another. Your Matt Donovans. Okay, these are the players that the Islanders have drafted, but they're going to contribute to the team in the long run, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. Now, Kalle Adelius, he played 2 for professional games in the Swedish Hockey League. I expect him to play full time in the Swedish Hockey League next season, and in my opinion, the Swedish Hockey League is probably the closest thing to the American Hockey League. So I'm going to be looking at his numbers. I normally don't look at numbers when they're 18, 19 years old. I just don't do it. I want to see the amount of games played. I read to see what kind of situations they're in. I try to watch as much video as I can to see what kind of situations they're put in, and we go from there. Kalle Adelius right now just survived as an 18-year-old. That's all I'm looking for. Next season, I'd like to see more full-time in the Swedish Hockey League. So I'm going to go and, hope for the best for him. But I still think Malinin and Adelius, these guys are right on pace for where they should be at such a young age. I'm going to move on here to the other junior. And this one, everyone should know, Isaiah George. Isaiah George just played 20 Ontario Hockey League playoff games for the London Knights. They lost in the finals. He was a top 4 defenseman. He's a very young 19 years old. Again, he was 18 all the way through, I think, the end of February. And usually the season ends around late March. So, again, another very young defenseman that Lou drafted who had one heck of a season. He kind of phased off a little bit in the playoffs, but again, I love the fact, and this is over 15 years, I love it when prospects play playoff games, even in Bridgeport. Why? Because it's a different beast. It's a higher level, and it tests their emotional and their mental fortitude. I want to see how they play. I want out of their routine. I want to see them play and how they handle the different competition. Right now, Isaiah George, he's definitely a smooth skater. He does remind me of a mix. He's got Adam Pelech's defensive game, but he can bring the puck up like Noah Dobson. And it is a compliment. But is he a top 4 defenseman yet? I'm not going to go there. That's the other thing I do with prospects. And Gary will tell you this, I'm much harder on prospects than everyone else who, boost them up. It's just the experience that I've had, because I've made those mistakes when I was younger. I thought Brendan Kitchen should have been in the NHL. Never made it. That was just my prime example. Do I think Isaiah George makes it to Bridgeport in 2 years? He's got to have one hell of a season next year. If not, there's no reason to. So, those are your defensemen right now. They're young, they're inexperienced, they're gathering the international, and they're gaining the playoff experience. So, again, they're 18, or they just turned 19. So, there's no rush in their development. There's no need to bring them to Bridgeport just yet. And if they are slowly developed, I'm also in favor of what Lou said. I'd rather bring them in late than, bringing them in early. You bring in these guys late, they're going to see NHL time. As of this conversation that we're all having right now, I think these guys are NHL. They still have the potential. If they don't, I'll be the first one to let you guys know. For right now, though, they're on a good development pace, and we'll go from there. Cutler, I am going to answer this one tonight. That's going to be coming up. Matt Maggio. I'm a little higher on Maggio than most, maybe. And I am going to do that for you guys. So, yeah, we are extremely deep at D, but I'm going to say this now. if the Islanders have a chance to land themselves a first pairing defenseman in the draft and with that second round pick, they should do it. No doubt about it. Because they still don't have a first pair potential D in the system. So, I may build up some of these kids right now, but I will also be fair and be realistic with you guys. Okay. There is no top end talent at the moment, but that doesn't mean that none of these kids can contribute in the near future. And this is what I'm going to go into right now. So this is a beautiful segue. So listen, lots and lots of forwards coming in from the junior ranks, and they're important. They're overagers. They've had plenty of playoff experience, but I'm going to show you guys the significance of why bringing in these kids right now is going to be helpful. So here we go. Without further ado, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the record of the Worcester Railers, the East Coast Hockey League affiliate of the New York Islanders. You can see right here, just missing the playoffs. Right here. What do they miss it by? 3 points. They lose out to Adirondack. Okay. The American Hockey League now. There we go. The Bridgeport Islanders. Just missing the playoffs. They were actually tied with Laval. And believe it or not, the Bridgeport Sound Tigers actually had a better record than last season, but they didn't make the playoffs this year. But here we are, dead smack in the middle, just on the edge of a playoff hunt. Okay, and now, last but not least, your New York Islanders, dead smack in the middle. Dead smack in the middle. Okay, so now I'm going to show you guys why these kids are important to this organization right now. So, what I like about the forwards, and this goes for Riley Piercy, the one who was signed by Chris Lamoriello and the Bridgeport the Bridgeport Islanders. We're talking about Matt Maggio. We're talking about Dalen Kiefler. All these guys, they all have playoff experience in the Canadian Hockey League. Dalen Kiefler is still playing in the Memorial Cup. A lot of people don't know that. Where is he? Riley Piercy. Here we go. Riley Piercy was actually pursued by the Detroit Red Wings way back when, and then COVID hit. Riley Piercy, for the most part, he's got 25 games in the playoffs, 4 goals, 8 assists, 12 points. It's not bad. For all I know, he could probably start. He could probably start in Worcester. Is that a bad thing? Absolutely not. Why? Because now you're filling up Worcester with enough players that they don't have to bring up to Bridgeport in case Bridgeport has injuries. Bridgeport will have enough depth where they won't have to call up Worcester, and Worcester could probably make a decent playoff run with the team that they can assemble. So Riley Piercy, again, affected by COVID. He's a legitimate sniper. Probably could be in the minor leaguers, but will he earn himself an NHL contract? That's his goal. We'll see what happens. The point is, there's enough talented depth in him that he can sustain minimum Worcester and possibly get Worcester into the playoffs. My next one, and here's another big one, guys. Dalen Kiefler. Dalen Kiefler, ladies and gentlemen, out of the 2022 draft, he's an overager as well. He was actually out of the 2020 draft. He's got 30 playoff games in the Western Hockey League. He's a left winger. He is your legit 6th-round version of Anders Lee. Okay, I don't know how athletic Dalen is, but for those of you who don't remember, Anders Lee went down to the 6th round because they didn't know if he was going to play football or hockey. And the Islanders took a shot at him, and the rest is history. Dalen Kiefler absolutely reminds me of Anders Lee. If Dalen Kiefler can come in with the speed, learn a little bit more of the two-way game, he's adding more depth to Bridgeport. He's also adding more scoring to depth, the scoring depth for Bridgeport. And that's also going to be another significant issue. Whenever these juniors come into Bridgeport, I put zero expectations on them. They're basically free agents. They're coming in. They don't know where to go, where to eat, the living conditions, so on and so forth. They're learning the pro game. So I never put expectations on these kids, but I'm not going to lie. I think they're going to be better than expected. If whenever I see a rookie come in, I'm only expecting 10 goals, 10 to 15 goals. So for these young players to come in, they're going to have a positive impact. But now this one in particular, he's my go-to, guys. Matthew Maggio, the 2022 draft pick, 142nd overall. Guys, he's an overager from the 2020 draft. And this is what I like about Maggio. And Nick Hirshon is going to love this if he ever watches this. For those of you who remember Mariusz Zurkowski, Maggio is a mix between Zurkowski's shot and Josh Bailey's passing. Not the behind the back passing, not that kind of passing. That passing that we all expected Josh to do more often, Maggio does that. Now, I'm not saying Matthew Maggio at the moment is going to be a top 6 forward in the NHL, but there is enough time for Maggio to work on his two-way game. And if he works on his two-way game, he's going to be the Zurkowski that we all hoped for a few years ago. Because for those of you who remember Chow, because that was his nickname, Chow never played defense. He was horrible at it. We all remember that. He could score. His skating was okay. But even back then, when you thought about right wingers, it was Bossy, Palffy, and Chow was somewhere in that mix, maybe number 3 at the time. Okay, he was that right winger for all of us growing up, late 90s, early 2000s. Okay, on some very bad teams, no doubt, but Chow's defense really wasn't there. With Matthew Maggio, if he can work on his two-way game again, you're getting what we were hoping out of Chow all those years ago, 20 years ago. Offense with a little bit of defense. He'd be better than Alan Quine. Okay. I'm excited to see what Maggio can do next season. Okay. I briefly forgot Alexander Lundkrantz from Europe. He's also been playing, and he's over in Europe again. He is a mix between, where would I put him? He's somewhere between Matt Martin and JG Peugeot. He's going to be a fourth liner in the NHL if he ever makes it here. Okay. What I like about him is that he's already played 52 games in the Swedish Hockey League. He's got 6 goals, 5 assists, 11 points. That puts him right on pace with McLean's kid. Okay. If he can spend another year or two in Sweden, God love him. I think Lundkrantz could absolutely be a fourth liner. He'd be a great fourth liner. I don't know if he'd be here on time to replace Matt Martin. But there's still potential. So in the last 5 years, Lou has drafted players that know they're not stars, but they're going to fill in. And this is where the importance is with all of these kids coming up. Here's the thing. If Maggio Kiefler, any of these kids come in and they produce. There is enough depth in Bridgeport these days that if there are any injuries to the Islanders, Kyle Palmieri, Zach Parisi, anyone on the forwards, anyone on the defense, I can tell you guys right now, I have absolutely no problem. Say by December, I have no problem sending up Simon Holmstrom, Samuel Bolduc, Ruslan Ishakov, Robin Salo. There is enough depth in Bridgeport that you can send up to maybe preserve what the Islanders are already doing. But at the same time, because of these overage juniors now coming in, Bridgeport is not going to suffer from their record like they did this year. Okay, Bridgeport missed the playoffs because New York didn't stay healthy. And I can't, and again, for those of you who have followed this show, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of Bridgeport and the importance of Worcester making the playoffs, because it adds another level of development to these kids, to these prospects. Look at Tampa Bay, Syracuse Crunch, dominate the AHL. They're a powerhouse. The Pittsburgh Penguins had the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins dominating. Washington has the Hershey Bears. The Hershey Bears are currently in the Calder Cup semifinals. The Buffalo Sabres. Okay, I can tell you right now, I'm putting the Buffalo Sabres in the playoffs next year because of what Rochester is doing right now. Rochester and Hershey, if you're not watching those games, you should be. Do not put the American Hockey League down because it's just a AAA. Phenomenal playoffs. And I'm telling you now, a good chunk of those Rochester's players, they're going to be on Buffalo next season. They're getting that development, that necessary development to get Buffalo into the playoffs and maybe make a run like New Jersey just did. I'm going to go with this right here. Here we go. Matthew. I just don't know if Lou is the right guy to build that farm system. I'm going to disagree with you just for a little bit here. I understand where you're going with that, but he has built up this farm system. Over the last 5 years. It's taken him 5 years to build up the farm system, and that had more to do with Garth Snow than it did Lou Lamoriello. Lou Lamoriello inherited this team basically with no one left. I mean, you had Michael Dal Cole, you had Kiefer Bellows, you had Josh Hosang, Robin Salo wasn't here, Ilya Sorokin wasn't here, or he was just starting to, but he wasn't here under Garth Snow. Basically after that 2015 draft, you did have fill-ins when they should have been better picks in the first round. Cutler, this is why. It's the poor drafting at the lower rounds, and at the same time, I'll call them out. Ownership did not spend money developing the players. You needed to bring in more coaches. You needed to sign some college free agents. You needed to sign more junior level free agents, guys who have had that experience. It's ownership. You're at Nassau Coliseum. You're losing millions of dollars. Part of me doesn't, I do feel bad for, especially Charles Wang losing $20 million a year, but you can't build up a farm system when you don't have money. And the same thing was kind of going on with Malkin and Ledecky. I'll say this again. The Islanders lost a lot of money. They lost a lot of money during those COVID seasons, and they had to go back to Nassau Coliseum. So what I was kind of hoping for in 2019 was that after they had drafted so well in 2018, I was really hoping that the Islanders were going to draft overagers starting back in 2019. I can tell you the first player I wanted. It was Brett Leeson. Brett Leeson is now playing for the Anaheim Ducks. He's having a semi-decent career, but now he's playing on an expansion team. I'm hoping they do better at this point. But it was guys like Brett Leeson that I was really hoping, and this is what we're going to see from this year. The depth in Bridgeport, the depth in Worcester are going to be good to the point where I don't see the Islanders needing to make any major moves at the trade deadline, bearing a plague. Bearing a plague, I can't see right now the Islanders trading their 24 pick, their 25 pick, their 26 pick. I don't see them doing it because now Lou has the depth, he has the talent from those minor league systems to where you get these top prospects and they're like seniors in high school. They did really well. They get senioritis by April 1st. We've all been there. Okay? These high school kids, they move on to college and they're like, oh crap, I got to work my butt off. I'm not going to pass. This is the year right now where the Islanders can absolutely establish themselves. Not at the Hershey level, not at the Syracuse level, not at the Providence level. Okay, for those of you who think the Bruins are going to crash, watch Providence. Providence is a massive powerhouse in the American Hockey League. The Bruins aren't going anywhere yet. The Islanders have the potential this year to start themselves off, building themselves up the way they are. And to answer your question, Cutler, real quick about Thompson, I am going to have Patrick Williams on in 2 weeks. We're going to cover the American Hockey League. We're going to cover Brent Thompson, and we're going to cover everything Bridgeport in 2 weeks. Next week, we're going to be covering the college kids. So that's going to, I have Mike McCormick from the College Hockey News. He's coming on the show next week as of right now. But in 2 weeks, we're going to take care of Bridgeport for you. But the Islanders right now, they have the potential to have enough depth and talent that we haven't seen in years, folks. Okay, if we go back to 93, the Islanders were in the conference finals. You also had the Denver Grizzlies and the Utah Grizzlies within that time period winning the IHL championships. That was with Tommy Salo, Ziggy Palffy, I think a little bit of Topper Bertuzzi. I don't know if they were a part. I think they were part of that run. There were a couple of other younger players coming up. The only other time I could see a team like the Islanders this deep has to go back to the Cup years, back in 82. The Islanders won the Cup. I think it was the Indianapolis Checkers won the Clark Cup. I think it was the Clark Cup back then. We haven't seen depth like this in the organization in decades. And Lou is setting the tone now for every other draft pick coming into the system and saying, look, you want to be part of the Islanders? You're going to work your butt off. This is not going to be a hand-me-down. How are the other two college men the Isle signed as free agents? I'm going to get into them next week. I like Aiden Fulp. Aiden Fulp was actually pursued by the Pittsburgh Penguins. They had their eyes on him for a little while. Listen, could any of these guys see NHL time? They could. I think there's enough talent there. Some of these guys were up for Defenseman of the Year, in their college, in their respective college conferences. The free agents that they brought in are all quality. It's all quality. They're not villains. They're quality. So at the very least right now, and even Chris Lamoriello signing Jacob Pavanka and Christian Kreiser, both two college draftees from the Islanders of 2018, he signed them to contracts. So they're all going to fill out Worcester. They're all going to fill out Bridgeport. And at some point during next season, I'm hoping not. I'm hoping that the Islanders, the New York Islanders, stay as healthy as possible, because the longer they stay healthy, the more talent I think Brent Thompson's going to have around him, the more of the two-way game that the professionals are going to be able to show these incoming junior prospects. If they can get everything together, look out. Look out. The Island, prime example, Jim Nill. Jim Nill of the Dallas Stars, general manager, he is now up for general manager of the year. Okay. For those of you who don't know the background of Jim Nill used to work for the Detroit Red Wings under Ken Holland. Both Jim Nill and Ken Holland used to work under a guy by the name of Jimmy Devellano. And if you don't know who that name is, ask your parents, ask your grandparents, because Jimmy Devellano was the assistant general manager to Bill Torrey. That's why I said Lou was kind of like the stepson to Bill Torrey. Bill Torrey did help Lou whenever he could. But Jim Nill is a, shall we say, a direct descendant of Bill Torrey's teachings. Jim Nill had his East Coast Hockey League team, his AHL team, and his NHL team in the playoffs. If you're going to win a Stanley Cup, you need to have enough backup from your American Hockey League team and at the very least your East Coast Hockey League team. Okay. And if you don't think East Coast Hockey League players don't make it to the Stanley Cup, talk to Carter Verhaeghe. Carter Verhaeghe was a Missouri Maverick, part of the Islanders organization. Some East Coast Hockey League players that start there, they do go on to the Stanley Cup Finals. It is possible. It does happen, especially for some of the goaltenders. I believe it was Logan Thompson for Vegas. There's a couple of them in there. Okay. This group of juniors coming into the Islander system that were drafted by Lou is exactly what this organization needs. I don't think Brent Thompson gets fired. I think he's going to stay because he's doing everything that's asked of him from Lou Lamoriello. And Patrick and I are going to get into that. And we're going to talk about the success of teams like Hershey, Syracuse, and we're going to apply that to see what Bridgeport needs to do as well. But as far as the juniors go, the juniors are absolutely necessary for this organization. And for the Islanders to have the abilities to sign a couple of college free agents, which is something I was really hoping for, was even better. So over the last 5 years, and we'll talk about the first round picks later on, but the drafting, in my eyes, was solid because it's now building up the necessary depth that the Islanders need. Are these kids going to be stars? I don't know. They may just be the Alan Quines. They may just be the Shane Princes. They may just be the Matt Donovans. They may just be the Aaron Ness. That's how old I am. I know all these players. It's bad. Okay? They may just be all these players, but look, Alan Quine, game-winning goal against Tampa. Right? You never know what you're going to get out of these players. Look, Matt Donovan, Griffin Reinhart, Game 6 against Washington, they were just thrown in there. Matt Donovan and Griffin Reinhart, they didn't allow a goal in that series. I think it was Game 7. No. Matt Donovan and Griffin Reinhart, they were in against the series, 7-game series with Washington. That was not 2016. That was still on Nassau Coliseum. That's when Matt Donovan was there. And I remember that. They paired them together. They didn't allow a goal. Folks, you just never know what a player can do when you're giving them a chance to play in the big spot. Okay? So for me, the kids are in. They're ready to roll. The development's going to be there. There's enough professional players right now in Bridgeport to help these kids. Oh, was it Florida? My apologies. There's enough professionals in Bridgeport right now. There's enough drafted players by the Islanders in Bridgeport right now to bring these kids along quicker. That's the important part. But now there's a good cluster of them. And now you're going to see a good mix spread out between Bridgeport and Worcester. Now we got to work on the big club. So that's my thought on the juniors. Next week, we're going to get talking about the college players. I'm still excited for some of them. I think they're coming in at the end of next season. That's going to build up Bridgeport even more. And this was something for me, I was excited about. I started to see this pattern again, 2019, and especially with COVID 220. Lou traded away those picks for some emergency help now, but he was also trading away for the future. He was trading for the future, which is now, in gaining some of those defensemen, but at the same time, he's bringing in the overagers who showed us that they could play in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League and William Dufour, in the Ontario Hockey League like Matt Maggio, and they're all ready to win now. So it's go time. It's go time in the minor leagues. It's time to see what these kids can do. So having said that, we can now talk about the big boys. We can talk. I will take any kind of questions, comments, concerns. That's my show on the juniors. I'm going to bring up, I'm glad you brought this up, Jim. Who's the odd man out among Skarek, Lennox, and Tikkanen? Look, listen, Tristan Lennox, for me, his numbers were not great again in the regular season. He did go to the playoffs. He was goaltender of the month in November. When he was in the playoffs, he played 11 games, 2.64 goals against average with a 908 save percentage. Again, the Ontario Hockey League is a shooter's gallery. Always has been, always will be. Right now, I think Tikkanen is going to remain in the East Coast Hockey League. I think they're going to give Tristan Lennox a chance to see where he is. I could see Lennox overtaking Tikkanen for now, but I say let them battle it out in Bridgeport. If Tikkanen can, Tikkanen showed enough that he can at least play in the East Coast Hockey League. I'd like to see what Tikkanen can do in the American Hockey League. But I'll say this now. I don't think Lennox is going to be a backup to Ilya Sorokin. At least not yet. I'm going to give him a pass this year because I want to see him play with professionals. Tikkanen the same way. I don't think he's going to be there yet. These guys need a little more room. Jakub Skarek, I think, is going to be the starter. I'm going to discuss him more in the Bridgeport section in 2 more weeks. Basically, they all need a little more time in seasoning. David, when's the next show? Next week. Next week, I'm looking to bring in Mike McMahon from the College Hockey News. We're going to talk about 2 of my favorite players that I've been watching, Alex Jeffries and Cameron Berg. These guys did very well in college. They went to the college playoffs, not to the Frozen Four, but I think both teams right now, especially Merrimack is supposed to go to the Frozen Four. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do. We're also going to get a little insight on Christian Kreisier and Jake Pavanka as well. And, we're going to talk about those 2 defensemen, Aiden Fulp and, I lost him. I lost the other defenseman. I have his face. I don't remember his name, but we're going to get info on him too. So I'm hoping Mike McCormick can join us next week. We should be good with that. And then the following week, we get into Bridgeport. We're going to talk about the professionals and Shane Malloy from SiriusXM. He's going to be joining me with the Bridgeport. And we're going to talk about prospects, development, and everything else like that. So I want to give Islander fans a really good, clear picture about prospects, about developing, and what that means for the Islanders organization moving forward. So I'm really looking forward to it. You should too. So I'm really excited to see, and I may do the draft again. I may do a live show on the draft. Speaking of the draft, because of these juniors, you're losing forwards in the junior section. Tristan Lennox is no longer there, so you have no goalie, you have no forwards in the junior ranks, the Canadian junior ranks. So if someone's dropping in the first round, could be a defenseman, maybe. He's got to be a really good defenseman. But I'm not going to lie, folks. If there is a goaltender who's got 1B potential, I think the Islanders have to draft him. Think about it. Sorokin's 27, something like that, 26. You got to have a number one. You got to have, he's going, he's 26, 27. You need a 1B at some point. Semyon Varlamov is not going to be around. And again, speaking of not going to be around, let's also talk about the implications that this might have on the Big Islander club. Let's just say, for example, Matt Maggio has a phenomenal season. William Dufour has a phenomenal season. Or better yet, Simon Holmstrom has a phenomenal season. If you get another injury to Kyle Palmieri and Simon Holmstrom's having a hell of a season, could you buy out Kyle Palmieri's final year of his contract? Of course you could. So now the Islanders get to save themselves more money by bringing in a prospect for pennies on the dollar for at least another season. They save up on more cap room that's supposed to go up anyway, and that gives the Islanders even more leverage heading into next season. So no, they don't have to spend another draft pick at the trade deadline. I don't think they have to do that. There are benefits to this. Okay, let's say, for example, Zach Parisi's out or he finishes career. You can move Ruslan Ishakov to a third or second line, put Anders Lee on the third line. Whoever you want to move, it doesn't matter. You can move Ruslan Ishakov for pennies on the dollar, saving yourself even more money going that way. So this group of juniors is essential to the Islanders organization because now this is going to allow competition to grow. And at the same time, when the competition in Bridgeport gets better and the veterans realize this, the veterans are going to be on the spot because now they know that their jobs are in jeopardy. That's the beauty of these juniors coming in this year. If Holmstrom better be worried, Ishakov better be worried, even Dufour better be worried. Because some of these kids, they could surprise you. And I'll tell you right now, these kids, they're all going to have to work their butts off. And the hope is that the work pays off because then they can threaten these older veterans with their own jobs. That's the kicker of what Lou's trying to do. He's trying to force these kids, to force the veterans to play better. Now we have that. Could you see Lou trading to get back in the first round this year? No, I don't think Lou's going to have to. I think Lou is going to pull a Kallio Delius. I think he's going to pull a Atu Ratu. I think he's going to let the draft just fall into his lap again. There's a couple of good prospects in, ranked 30th or better that have the potential of falling just because of, the team's needs. And I believe the Islanders are picking 55th, 56th. I'm not sure. They had the second round pick, but there's a couple of good players in there, that could drop. And I'm not getting into details just yet because they haven't gone through the combines yet. We haven't seen anybody slip or move up yet. That's going to happen at the combine, but I'm going to have a list of players that I'm hoping would slip down to the Islanders number. And I think the Islanders are just going to take the best player available. So yeah, I'm really excited with Shane Malloy. He is like the Mel Kiper of junior hockey. I agree with that. There's a couple of other guys I really do enjoy, but yeah, Shane and I are going to get into that the week before draft, and then draft night. I think I'm off. I'm not sure. So yeah, I'm covering the draft all of June. So hello from Saskatchewan. Thank you, Robin. How are you? So that's it, guys. That's my primary show here. That's the importance of the juniors coming in. I'm not worried about the defensemen. Let them grow. They just turned 18, guys. They're kids. I'm not worried about them. Let them grow. Give them the Scott Mayfield treatment. Let them be projects. Let them grow into their own. I still think they have NHL potential at such a young age. That's fine. That's all you want to hear at this point, especially at the age of 18. But these junior players, even some of the college kids, They're all coming in. They're coming in. They're filling in the roles. Now they're going to build even greater competition, and that's something that every organization needs if you're going to win the Stanley Cup. So, any free agent talk among our free agents? Well, I said this before. Excuse me for one moment. When it comes to the Islanders and free agency, it's always personal with the players. It's always personal. Scott Mayfield, does he get 4 in the open market? He probably could. Does he want to move? I don't think so. Does he want his wife to move? I don't, does his wife want to move? I don't think so. Even Josh Bailey said at, the closing arguments, the closing session of his season, he's going to be on Long Island no matter what after his playing career is over. So, and Bo Horvat just recently said, Long Island's a hidden gem. So when it comes to the free agents, it's more of a personal decision. If Scott Mayfield's if his value is at $4 million, but he's 30 years old, maybe some teams only offer him 3 years. Maybe Lou gives him 4 years. 4 years at $3 million, something to that effect. Well, Robin, this is a good point. I was thinking about Mayfield. We have to make room for the kids. No, you don't. You don't have to make room for the kids right now. The Islanders do not have a right-handed defenseman anywhere near ready to replace Scott Mayfield. Facts. No. They have a couple of left defensemen in Robin Salo and Simon Bolduc. Bolduc. Simon Bolduc. I'm tired. Samuel Bolduc. Okay. They don't have a right-handed defenseman. Samuel Bolduc, in my humble opinion, is not ready for the NHL yet. He still needs a little more seasoning. He showed some good moves, decent moves while he was up with the Islanders. I think he's a good defenseman as a call-up. I don't think he's ready to replace, believe it or not, he's not ready to replace Sebastian Aho. Robin Salo is my biggest enigma. I had Robin Salo paired up with Noah Dobson at some point. I didn't see any of that in Bridgeport this year. I don't know with Robin Salo. Robin Salo with me was such a question mark that I actually feel more comfortable with Sebastian Aho than I do Robin Salo. I will say this about Samuel Bolduc, though. You give Samuel Bolduc a healthy season this year with a decent playoff run in either the Islanders or Bridgeport, I think Samuel Bolduc will be your third pair defenseman next season. And I think Sebastian Aho is going to earn himself a legitimate contract somewhere else. Again, I've said this before. When Bo Horvat showed up, Sebastian Aho was the second best defenseman in scoring points. He had 10 points in 30 games. Ryan Pulock also had 10 points, but Sebastian Aho was out for 2 more weeks. Okay, there is a significant improvement in Sebastian Aho's game, especially when it comes to scoring, ever since Bo Horvat showed up. Okay, so for now, I don't think anyone in Bridgeport is going to replace Sebastian Aho as of this conversation. Talk to me by January, that might be a different conversation. This is what I'm trying to say, folks. Bridgeport's this close to having a legitimate impact on the veteran players of this New York Islanders team. If the veterans don't step up their game, Lou now has enough in his repertoire that he can at least replace some of these older players. Ditto with Ishikov. I'm really hoping he gets a shot this year. Again, he reminds me of Matthew Barzal in the American Hockey League. He tries to go 1-on-3. he gets pushed off the puck. He doesn't flop like Josh Hosang. He takes it. But the playbook is out on him too. Ishikov needs a little more talent around him to be a better and more effective playmaker. Because that's what he is. He is a playmaker. He was a centerman. He can play center. He can take faceoffs, but he's also on that left wing. Bringing in someone like Maggio, Dylan Kiefler. Kiefler can set up right in front of the net. So Ishikov can go, bombs away if he wanted to, or if he can make that slap pass to Kiefler, and Kiefler can deflect that in. That's part of Kiefler's game. I like I said, bringing all these kids in. I'm if I were living closer to Bridgeport, I would probably be a season ticket holder this year. That's how excited I am for Bridgeport. But Ishikov for me, and even Arnaud Durando and Ruslan Ishikov, I'm high on right now. I like these kids. Isles need more help on defense than offense. I know where you're going with that, Rich. I'm going to say this. Sebastian Aho, this was his first full season playing in his first full season. Romanov, this was his first season as an Islander. Noah Dobson, this was his first year without Zdeno Chara or Andy Green. I think the coaching staff probably could have been a little bit better with them on that, but it's all their first years. It's their first timers in that case. So part of me still thinks that, even when you bring up Hudson Fasching, Bo Horvat, to a slighter degree, Pierre Enval, there's a lot of firsts here, a lot of first years, a lot of firsts for everything. I think you could see a rebound next season for some of these players. That's my hope. Aho was also a disaster on defense. Like I said, they can fix that still. But I think you're going to see more of a disaster from Robin Salo and Samuel Bolduc over 70 games if you play them at the start of the season than you would with Sebastian Aho. Yeah, and as a team, they did finish with the fifth best goals against. Yes, as a team, there's no doubt. But they need their scoring from their defensemen. And I've said this before. I've been blue in the face with it. When the Islanders defensemen score 2 points or more in any game, that basically their win ratio is 2-1. It's 2-1. The Islanders last year were on pace for 100 points or better for 60 out of the 80 games. 3/4 of your season. If they stay healthy with the amount of depth that this team is now infusing, I'm a little more optimistic. But the question is, where are you going to get the offense from in terms of your defense? Are you going to see a progression from Sebastian Aho? Are you going to see more power play time from, or goals from Noah Dobson or Ryan Pulock? That to me is more on the coaching. Rich, I also agree with this. A full year of Horvat, a healthy Wahlstrom, and a healthy Matt Barzal. Got to be healthy, and Adam Pelech can stay healthy too. So what you're saying, see if we move on from underachieving vets, it will be at the deadline. I'm thinking Mayfield and Varlamov gives the best chance for picks and prospects. I don't think Varlamov's getting moved anywhere. I'll say this now. I think if Varlamov resigns with the Islanders, I think that just made re-signing Ilya Sorokin that much easier. Scott Mayfield, I mean, you could make a hockey trade. The biggest question for me is, where is Matt Barzal going to play next season, folks? Is he going to play the wing with Bo Horvat? Does he still want to play center? Because that's going to affect what Lou wants to do with this team. What's Josh Bailey going to fetch you? Could Josh Bailey fetch you another puck-moving defenseman? A scoring puck-moving defenseman, because getting out of the zone and the transition, it needs the absolute work. That's number one. They have to get out of there. So the defense needs to get going. The offense needs to get going. Agreed. Envell, Horvat, Wallstrom should all hopefully be there. Correct. Defense, we are debating about who the 6th and 7th D-man will be. No, I don't even think there should be a 6th or 7th defenseman. You want me to give you a 6th or 7th defenseman, I'll give you Grant Hutton right now. Grant Hutton should absolutely be the 7th defenseman on this team. Grant Hutton plays a right-handed defenseman version of Adam Pelech. Very safe. A case could have been made for Parker Wotherspoon. That 7th defenseman, fill in. You know, should they even go with 7 defensemen? Why? You know, and for me, for those of you debating a 6th and 5th and 6th defenseman, listen, Sebastian Aho and Noah Dobson were 5th and 6th defensemen. They were the 3rd pair last year towards the end of the season. They racked up the most points. And again, the Islanders' win ratio was 2-1 when they were scoring. A big reason why the Islanders made it to the playoffs was from the offensive abilities of Sebastian Aho and Noah Dobson. The maturation of these kids. Okay, granted, Aho's 27. Okay, why did we do so well with Matt Barzal out? That's because that was Matt Barzal, the winger. We didn't lose a centerman, technically. Bo Horvat was there. Brock Nelson was still there. J.G. Pageau was there. Casey Cizikas was there. Bo Horvat plays more like Brock Nelson than Matt Barzal does. If anything, Matt Barzal needs to take a lesson from Bo Horvat on how to play center for this team. And that's this is what I was saying. There's a lot of firsts. The kids wore down. They won't be worn down next season. I hate giving Joe credit. You guys know this on the show all the time. I hate giving Joe credit. I love him to death. I hate giving him credit. It's a family thing, okay? We learned this from Mark Howe. And for those of you who don't know Mark Howe, Hall of Famer, former scout for the Detroit Red Wings, Philadelphia, player, defenseman for the Philadelphia Flyers, the Hartford Whalers, NHL Hall of Famer. He said this to us, to our faces. The biggest key in the offseason for every team is conditioning. It's conditioning. After what the Islanders saw their players go through, after what the players realized what they have to go through, they have to take their conditioning to another level. The kids will not wear down next season. That includes the kids in Bridgeport. Because let me tell you something, there's nothing better than watching these kids graduate to a degree, playing in the big leagues, understanding what it takes to get into the big leagues, and then coming back and saying, I need to work on this, I need to work on this, and I'm going to get my butt in shape during the summertime so that way when I do go back up, I never have to go back. That's the definition of keeping a prospect later than they should be. All right, as we talk about cap space and whatnot, that's for another show. I told you guys, don't worry about it. Don't worry about that right now. Don't worry about the signings. Right now, know that Lou does have a plan, at least in terms of developing the rest of this organization. The salary cap, the free agents, everything else is going to play itself out. And heading into next season, if you live anywhere near Bridgeport, or if you're close to the ferry, if you want to be even a partial season ticket holder for Bridgeport, you may as well get there, because let me tell you, these kids coming in from juniors because of this prospect show, they're going to be good. Not from the show, but because of the show that they put on in juniors, they're going to be really good. So listen, I'm an hour and 10 minutes into this. I went a little longer than I wanted to. Thank you guys for coming on so much. I really appreciate it. Listen, do me a favor. Go on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter at Isles Talk. You can follow me at P_Kreischer. Go on Facebook. Like us on, follow us on Facebook. And please, please, please go on to YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to me. We're trying to do a few different things coming up. And next week, like I said, I'm trying to get Mike McCormick from the College Hockey News. We should be good to go with that. The following week, we're going to have Shane Malloy from SiriusXM and Hockey Prospect Radio. He's going to be joining me in 2 weeks. And then after that, we got the draft coming up. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on. It's been an absolute blast. Can't wait to get into the college kids next week. And have fun. Enjoy the rest of the American Hockey League playoffs. Enjoy the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I have the Vegas Golden Knights winning the Stanley Cup. So thank you again for coming on. Don't forget to follow us everywhere on social media. Been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Let's go Islanders. And we'll see you guys next week.